Yo, what's going on, everyone? Mike Hill, the Wholesaling Titan here. And in today's real estate wholesaling video, I'm answering the very popular question, what do I do if I don't have the earnest money deposit, also known as EMD? So let's go ahead and get started with a quick definition of an earnest money deposit, also called a good faith deposit. And this is essentially a deposit made to your seller when you agree to purchase the property. It represents your intention or good faith to purchase. It validates your contract, and it goes towards the purchase price of the property. Now you can negotiate how much it is and when you need to send it into an escrow account, but typically it's a relatively small amount of money, and often kind of the default practice is to send it within about 3 days after signing your contract. Before we get further into this video and to make the most of this video, a quick reminder that I am hosting a free live training later this week where I'm going to build on some of the concepts, go into more details, some of the concepts in this video. You can go to www.wholesalingwithmike.info to register. You can also view upcoming live trainings where I do a ton of Q&A. And you can also watch replays of past presentations. So be sure to check that out. I'll also put a link in the description down below. So when I first started wholesaling, remember guys, I started this business with no money at all, like no exaggeration. In fact, I did my very first deal without spending like a penny. So imagine when I first started, getting my offers accepted and contracts signed, man, there was just like this massive panic. And if you can relate, I get it, and I have a few solutions for you. But if you are in that position and watching this, I want you to at least give yourself some credit for taking action and kind of figuring it out along the way. Like a lot of people don't agree with that line of thinking. If you go to groups on Facebook or visit visit forums like Bigger Pockets, you're going to see tons of people telling you, if you don't have the funds to buy the property, you have no business making offers. And I'd say don't let the naysayers get to you. I mean, yeah, that would be ideal if you had the money to purchase the property. But if you have good intentions for everyone, if you work your process correctly, if you behave ethically and provide real value in helping people out of tough situations and putting yourself in a better situation, by all means. As an entrepreneur, sometimes you just have to take that risk, kind of go the unconventional route, push through the uncertainty, and just do it. There's a great book by Richard Branson. It's called Screw It, Let's Do It. Say yes and kind of figure out the details as you go. So back to my humble beginnings, that panic from not having the earnest money deposit. This has embarrassingly happened to me more than once. And what I'd like you to take away from my mistakes is that a lot of tactics I've shared over the years and continue to share, doing deals with no money down, doing deals with no deposit, doing deals without personal proof of funds. The idea is not for you to do all of your deals this way. I mean, this is definitely the harder way. And that's why entry into this business can present some challenges. But I make these videos because this is where I struggled in my personal story. And this is where most people that reach out to me are struggling. So realize that you don't need to, nor do you want to do things the hard way forever. You don't want to do no money down deals forever. I want to encourage you to spend money in your business. The more you can start spending, whether it's on marketing or larger deposits or software, employees, whatever. These things are going to make the business so much easier, so much more lucrative, and more predictable. But in the beginning, sometimes you kind of got to start where you are. And using some of these tactics will help you get to that place where you can spend more, where you can create competitive advantages, and ultimately get you where you need to be so you can start doing multiple deals with relative ease each and every month. So on that note, again, this is not an issue that you want to deal with on a continuous basis. Ideally, you do your first deal without the money for earnest money for the deposit. You make a healthy profit, and then you take that money, you invest it back into your business, and specifically put money aside exclusively for use as future earnest money deposits, so you don't have to worry about it again. In fact, as a quick side note, some title companies will actually allow you to leave a deposit in escrow and give you a verification of deposit letter. So what that means is that you're going to give them, say, $1,000, and they give you a letter of verification saying that you have $1,000 in escrow with them. You can now show that letter when making all of your offers, and it can help out quite a bit. So that's your first tip on what you do when you have the money, but let's say you don't have it at all. What do you do? So first, before we get into the specific tactics, one quick general point I'll make is to start with your self-talk. So many people will hit me up and say things like, Mike, what do? I don't have the money for a deposit. And rather than beginning with a limiting belief in the form of a very definitive statement, I want you to start with a question. How do I get the money? And without going into some long, psychology-based explanation, just understand your brain works like a search engine, right? So when you ask Google a question, it doesn't question the question. It just automatically starts looking for answers. And your brain will start to do the same thing because, 90+% of your brain activity is subconscious. So if you make this a general practice, you'll be surprised at some of the automatic answers that start coming to you. So now we can go ahead and get some of the more specific tactics to employ if you find yourself in this situation. So first things first here, you want to try and make your offers assignable. So with an assignment, your end buyer can be the one to put up the earnest money deposit since they are simply taking over your existing contract as opposed to, say, a double closing where there are two transactions and you'll oftentimes need to put up the deposit for the A to B side. Now, if you have any questions on the difference between assignment and a double closing, you can check out my last video for a full explanation, and I will add a link in a card somewhere and in the description down below. Now, typically, and I'm going to speak in very general terms here, assignable contracts are often easier to get accepted when dealing directly with the seller. And that's simply because you're dealing with a seller who is motivated. The average homeowner isn't necessarily knowledgeable about assignments or contracts or wholesaling in general, and they simply want to close. Now, sometimes an assignment won't be an option or it'll just be harder to get accepted. Your seller might have some reservations, maybe give you a little bit of pushback. And that's especially common when you have more knowledgeable parties involved. Maybe there's an attorney involved. And often when you're dealing with a listed property and there's an agent involved, that can happen. And that's just because some people can view assignable contracts as kind of a red flag that you might not close on the deal. And in this case, there are a few things you can do to increase your chances of getting a seller to agree to an assignable contract. So first, there are different types of ways to do assignments. The first and most common type of assignment simply says, your contract's assignable, meaning you can just give it to someone else, and then you are released from any type of liability, which for obvious reasons can make a seller very skeptical. Now, the other way to do this, the other option is to make your contract assignable, but indicate that you will still be liable, meaning you're giving a guarantee that you're going to make sure that the deal closes. And by the way, if for some reason the end buyer doesn't come through, if it doesn't close, it just means the seller keeps their deposit as their only recourse. So really, you're still not at any risk of loss. But it is saying that, just because you're saying, you're liable for the closing, it can make a seller or agent more at ease. Now, on some contracts, some standard contracts like the Florida State Approved contract that I use, Florida FAR, these options are already in your contract and you can just check the ladder. On other contracts, you kind of have to write those details in. Now, your next option here, in an effort to get your contract accepted as assignable, is simply effective communication. So if you get any type of pushback, you can just justify and explain yourself to the seller. Let them know, for example, hey man, like I am an investor and I want to have different, we employ different strategies and I want to have different exit clauses that I can use. You can also say things like, I'm not sure how we want to take title, and I would like the option to change the buyer name as opposed to quit claiming the deed after closing. So I might want to put in my name, might want to put in my LLC, I might want to form a new LLC, might want to put in my partner's name, partner LLC, what have you. And then if that doesn't work, the next thing you can do is simply submit a non-assignable contract, but put the buyer's name as a land trust. You can also do this as an LLC, but the land trust is preferable. And then you resign as the trustee and assign a different beneficiary, which essentially means that the land trust is the owner. The owner on the deed never changes. It's always going to be the land trust. But the end buyer is basically buying the trust. So it's actually pretty simple, but it might sound complicated. Now, I'm not going to go into full details here in this video, but I do have another video walking you through how and why you would do this. So I'll link it here and again in the description below. Now, another thing you can do is just submit your contract as non-assignable. And once you have an executed agreement with your seller, you can then submit an addendum to change the contract to assignable. You can use some of the justifications I mentioned a minute ago. For example, I'm not sure how I'm going to take the title yet, yada, 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 as reasons for that request. But there are a few other reasons why you might want to go this route and why it's oftentimes, it works better than asking for an assignable contract from the beginning. So first of all, your offer has a better chance of being accepted in the first place. Oftentimes if there are multiple offers and a competing offer is non-assignable while yours is assignable, you're going to lose that competitive edge. The next reasons are kind of rooted in psychology, where it's much easier to ask for adjustments, any type of changes, any contingencies after you're under contract, because one, the seller is already committed to you, and as human beings, right, when we make decisions, our minds will look for ways to justify the decisions we've already made. Two, they've anticipated the closing. They felt the relief of selling. They've mentally envisioned the sale. They've made plans contingent on the closing. They've mentally spent the profit. And then three is probably the biggest one. The seller has a sure thing. That thought of starting over is very painful. Who's to say the same thing won't happen with another buyer? People are also more motivated by potential loss than gain. They won't want to lose the sure thing, your deal. Think about it. What's stronger motivator for you? If I offered to give you $100, if I told you I'm going to take $100 out of your bank account, take something away from you already have. It's that whole bird in the hand is worth two in the bush concept. And then finally, you have nothing to lose by asking. If they say no, the deal isn't off. You're still under contract, and then you'll just find ways to navigate through your non-assignable deal, which we'll get to that in just a second. So those are your initial options, using that assignable contract to have your end buyer put up the deposit, in which case the amount really doesn't matter. And a few ways to increase your chances of getting an assignable contract accepted. But what if you can't find a buyer before the earnest money is due? Because typically your inspection period, which is the time you have to find a buyer before your deposit becomes non-refundable, it's going to be longer than when your earnest money deposit is due. Or, what if assignment just isn't an option at all? So next option to consider is simply to make offers with a lower earnest money deposit amount. Simple, right? Now, some deals will require higher earnest money deposits depending on the price and also the source of the deal. I'm going to discuss that in just a second. But in many cases, you can get by with very small amounts. $100 can work when you're dealing directly with motivated sellers. Technically, you can do like $10. I haven't done that personally. Lowest I've done is $100. But either way, that's like really nothing. And then if you're making offers on listed properties, I recommend you use $1,000 as your default. Now, can you go lower? Yes, but oftentimes, unless you're buying a really, really cheap house, it significantly decreases the chances of you being taken seriously and your offer being accepted. Again, this does depend on your market and the offer price. I bought a house in Jacksonville for $12,000, but I'm talking in general, in most markets, when you're dealing with entry-level single-family homes. And can you offer higher? Of course you can. It's always going to be good. When you do, it'll increase your chance of getting your offers accepted. But since the concept of this video assumes you don't have that money just yet, this, $1,000 is a good starting place. Now, if you get pushback on your initial offer and the amount of earnest money that you're putting up, you can simply justify by letting them know that you are an investor. Again, that communication is key. So just explain that, you're looking at a lot of different properties, you're making offers on other properties, and you don't want to have multiple earnest money deposits up all over the place. So this will not only justify the deposit, but the explanation will give you some credibility as an investor. It also invests a degree of FOMO, that fear of missing out on your seller, makes them move a little faster with a sense of urgency. They might be more likely or more receptive to your offer, may not counter as hard, knowing that you have other options that you're going for and they could potentially miss out on a sale. Now, if the deposit amount is the sticking point or if the seller is just adamant about having that higher deposit, you can try and kind of meet them in the middle by doing this. So offer the same deposit amount, let's say $1,000 from our previous example, but then you can offer to put up an additional deposit of say, $4,000 after your inspection period is up. And that's one way of compromise where it can be mutually beneficial to both parties, but it's essentially a way of you getting an extension on when the full deposit is due. Because by that time, by the time your inspection period's up, you'll know whether or not you have a deal, whether or not your end buyer can, put up the rest of the deposit, or, maybe you'll have to cancel that contract. Now, before you try utilizing these techniques, you have to realize, man, these are not going to work on every single deal. And that being said, you really want to hedge your bets by going after the deals where earnest money won't be as big of a sticking point, which now brings us to targeting. So understand that certain deals you just can't do yet, or rather they're probably not worth your time to pursue right now. So some REOs, for example, right? Notoriously, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, these deals are gonna require 10% down. They're not gonna allow you to sign the contract. They may have deed restrictions in there. And there's some loopholes to get around this stuff, but you're probably gonna be better off just not pursuing these deals just yet. In the same vein, you probably don't want to be looking at, $1 million properties, very expensive properties, since they're probably going to want to see more skin in the game. This is another reason why knowing what you're looking for and what your buyers are looking for is so important. Side note, little plug, I'm talking about this in much more detail on my upcoming live training this week, so make sure you're there. But I often make the analogy that this is like playing a video game. When you first start the game, you typically don't have the resources you need to face the last levels or the final boss. My Legend of Zelda people, you start with the wooden shield, the wooden sword, and only through playing the game do you earn the keys and the rupees and the metal shield and the diamond sword and all that stuff to access those final levels and bosses. So basically, you kind of just got to respect the process. So again, you ideally want to be in that range where you're looking at deals that you can contract with anywhere between $100 and $1,000 in terms of your earnest money deposit. I firmly believe that with the proper motivation, anybody watching this video can get together $1,000. Like, so many times people say to me, yo, Mike, I'll do anything to make this business. I'll be your hardest worker, blah, blah, blah. But then they get to this one road bump and they quit. Which brings us to my rapid fire answers here. Remember those empowering questions. How can I get the money together? And your mentality at this point should be that of someone, who's had their parents or spouse or kids kidnapped and the ransom is $1,000 or your family dies. You would get that money together. And yes, I know that's extreme, but drawing the line, everything legal, what would you and what could you do? So first things first, I want you to go line by line through your budget, through your bank account, your credit cards, your debit cards. And look, nobody gets into this business to be frugal. I know that. You want financial freedom. But this is just for the short term, for a season. So make that sacrifice in the short term. And I encourage you, again, go through your spending and cut everything you can. Be as cheap as you've ever been. How often do you eat out? Can you reduce your grocery bill? Are you spending unnecessarily? Do you have Netflix? Do you have Hulu? Do you overspend on clothes or video games or movies? Just cut all that shit out. Next, what do you have that you can sell? Do you have an extra computer, a laptop, a PlayStation, some guns, an Xbox, some jewelry, some clothes, some furniture? Try to sell them on eBay, sell them on Craigslist, have a garage sale. Worst case, take them to a pawn shop. You can apply for a credit card. You can take out a personal loan. You can borrow money from family or friends. Offer to pay them back in interest. Show them what you're doing. Bring them in on a deal. Maybe give them back 150%. You can work overtime at your current job. You can get a second job. You can work part-time. See if you have anything of value. Do you have comic books? Do you have collector's items? Do you have Pokemon cards? Do you have a talent? You can do some gigs on Fiverr. Even if you don't have a unique talent, there are generic gigs like data entry you can do on Fiverr. You can pick up side gigs on Craigslist. And don't let your ego get in the way, by the way. I remember picking up gigs to mop department store floors at like 4 in the morning. And that was me with my fancy Duke degree. Janitorial work. You can find gigs for taking pictures. You can do moving gigs, junk removal. There's just so many options. You can also joint venture and partner with other wholesalers and other investors. Worst case, you can even give them the lead and ask them to be the primary, contract signer, the buyer, and bring you in as a JV partner. You can also do a JV agreement, and in addition to a JV agreement, you can have the partner, be it family, friends, another wholesaler, as a co-buyer where they actually sign on the contract and they put up the deposit. Remember, it's a relatively small amount of money, especially given that return on your investment that you're going to make. That you're going to make in terms of profit. So I really feel like if you want it badly enough, you will find a way to come up with this money. You just got to be a little bit creative. There are just so many options. Don't limit yourself. Don't put yourself in a box. And remember, if you can just do this once or twice, just get 1 or 2 really good deals, that will put you in a position where you never have to kind of panic or use some of these techniques ever again. And once you stack a little paper, right, you can gain some leverage in that competitive advantage where you can start putting up larger deposits. In addition, remember to kind of keep in mind these ideas. They're not always going to work on every deal. I think this is worth reiterating, right? But the great thing about this business is you don't need 100% success rate. Especially in the beginning, you just need to work a high volume game. And with just one successful deal, this all becomes so much easier. All right, so on that note, I just want to thank you guys so much for joining me. It's always a pleasure. I love making these videos. If you guys want to continue this discussion, or I'm sure there's some things I forgot or didn't cover here, or you have additional questions, please leave those down in the comments below. I'll be sure to get back to you. Remember to join me on the train this week at www.wholesalingwithmike.info. Even if you're watching this video in the future, at that site, you'll be able to see any other live trainings that I have coming up, as well as watch replays of previous live trainings that are not featured here on the YouTube channel. So definitely be sure to check that out. Like I said, I do a lot of live Q&A on those, which is always a lot of fun to do as well. I'll be taking your questions. This training coming up is going to be very much fluff free. It's actually going to be a little bit shorter than usual, but I've kind of asked myself, how can we cut? Some of you guys are just doing too much. You have so much information. You're trying a little bit of everything, but not laser focus on the one thing that's going to get you results. And I just said, how can I break these down into like tangible, actionable to-do steps where people are like, step 1, do this, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and bam, we have a deal. And I'm not kidding you guys. If you guys follow these steps, I'll show you exactly how to do it. You'll do a deal very quickly. Ideally, the goal is for you to do it in 30 to 45 days. And yes, I have the results, the proof, the HUD statements to do that, obviously from myself, but also from my students. I've had students who have done deals in as little as 4 weeks. So definitely come. The training's free. It's going to be a lot of fun. I always love doing these things. Again, it's wholesalingwithmike.info. Join me there. As always, please do like, comment, share, subscribe. Again, it helps the channel out so much, and I really do appreciate it. Thanks for watching again, and I look forward to your comments, questions. Look forward to seeing you on the live training. And until then, I'll just ask you that magical question one more time. How badly do you want it? You want it badly enough, you will find a way. Cliche as it sounds, where there's a will, there's a way. So thanks again for joining me. I'll see you guys in the next video and hopefully on my live training. Until then, happy wholesaling. I'll talk to you soon, all right? Peace.